And now my guest is Microsoft Assistant General Counsel Dennis Garcia. Dennis, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's jump right into the conversation. What has happened in the past year with respect to cybersecurity law?
Well, the short answer is there's been lots of activity on the cybersecurity and privacy law front in the European Union, much less activity in the United States. So last October, Europe's highest court, the European Court of Justice, invalidated a long-standing agreement between our country and the EU, known as the EU-US Safe Harbor Framework. And Safe Harbor provided a framework for the transfer of data from the EU to the US. That was invalidated, and that's going to be replaced by something known as the EU-US Privacy Shield. But this Privacy Shield is still subject to further review and examination. In addition, last December, the European Union finally passed some major data privacy reform legislation in the form of the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. And this GDPR goes into effect sometime in 2018. So the Europeans have been very active on the cybersecurity privacy law front. In our country, as it's been well documented, it's a tough environment to pass significant legislation in Washington, D.C. So we're still subject to some older and dated cybersecurity and privacy laws. An example of one of these dated and older cybersecurity laws is known as the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. It was put in place 30 years ago, back in 1986, when President Reagan was president. Mark Zuckerberg was only 2 years old. And this law defines the landscape as to when law enforcement should get access to data. Of course, they never anticipated a mobile-first, cloud-first computing environment with data scattered throughout the world.
Right.
So you've got these dated laws in the US, you've got some more current laws in the EU, and then there's other countries that put together some data localization laws. So what this means is sometimes it's an uncertain environment as to what laws applies.
Right.
It creates sort of a conflicts of laws nightmare, if you will.
So what effect is this uncertainty having on organizations at large?
Right, so we're seeing the uncertainty with regards to what laws apply. We see all these high-profile data loss incidents continuing to happen. And also there's a big public debate right now going on as to when should government get access to data to protect all of us from a national security perspective, but we still need to keep private information of individuals. So lots of uncertainty. I think it comes down to one word: trust.
Right.
Something which our Microsoft president and chief legal officer, Brad Smith, likes to say time and time again. Is companies are only going to buy technology if they can trust that technology. And I also tell customers that for whatever reason, if you can't trust your technology provider, you shouldn't just walk away from that provider, you should run away from that provider.
Now, of course, as you try to build trust, but also introduce technologies like things like the cloud, how does that affect this cybersecurity conversation?
Well, as we've seen, the cloud computing marketplace has been growing exponentially. It's become a crowded cloud provider marketplace. There's lots of choices nowadays for our customers to choose from. But it's very important that our customers take a step back and identify what we like to call at Microsoft a trusted cloud provider. And the way to do that is for customers to engage in some thoughtful and deep due diligence in selecting and identifying a cloud provider that they can trust. They need to understand, what does a cloud provider do in the area of data protection, privacy, security, data control? Are they transparent? And the best way to do that is to make sure you engage actively the key stakeholders in your company, such as your in-house attorney, your privacy expert, your security specialist, people from your risk management and compliance function. Get them involved actively in an early stage. Don't wait to get them involved until you've signed a contract with a cloud provider, because that is really much too late.
So what should leaders be thinking about in regards to data protection and control?
Well, a few things. In the area of data protection, I think a great place to start is what I call the E word, encryption. You want to work with a cloud provider who's using some strong, best-in-class encryption methodologies and technologies. In addition, you want to work with a cloud provider who hopefully has some cybercrime fighting assets, what we discussed in the last session. You know, at Microsoft, we've got our Cyber Crime Center. We also have our Digital Crimes Unit team. These folks, for many years, have been fighting the cyber criminals, identifying them, partnering with law enforcement to bring them to justice. And the key point is everything which we learn, we put back into our cloud solutions to make them even more robust and secure. Right? So in addition to that, you want to, from a data control perspective, there's a few things you want to think about. Data control, you want to work with a cloud provider who helps enable you to continue to control and get access to your data in the cloud. So you want to sign a cloud contract with a provider which is clear that you retain ownership to your data.
Right.
After all, it's your data. You want to make sure that your cloud provider can only use your data to perform services, not for advertising or other commercial purposes. Also find out from your cloud provider what happens when law enforcement comes knocking on their door seeking access to your data. right? Microsoft has very clear policies in this area. We've got clear contract terms which state that if we do get these requests, which are very, very unlikely, we have transparency reports which come out twice a year, or most recent one was issued last Friday. And it's a very, very rare instance that we ever get any of these requests pertaining to our enterprise customers. We define enterprise customers as customers with 50 or more licenses to Microsoft technology. When we get these requests, we try to redirect those requests to customers. We get the customers to work together with the government when needed. There may be some times where law enforcement provides us with legitimate legal process. Under those circumstances, we may have to hand over that data, but when we do so, we will notify you, assuming we're allowed to do so under the law. And we also have a very healthy track record for resisting requests from law enforcement when they don't provide us with suitable legal process.
Right. So, and let's evolve the conversation into compliance.
Good. Compliance is a very key area you want to drill down on.
Right.
You want to make sure that your cloud provider helps enable you as a company to meet your compliance needs. At Microsoft, we feel we have the largest compliance portfolio in the cloud services industry. Let me share two examples. One's an important standard, and the second's an important law. With regard to the standard, there is a newer standard known as ISO 27018. ISO stands for the International Organization of Standardization. They're a very well-known standards-making body which creates various standards in the area of information protection and governance. About a year and a half ago, they came up with the first international standard for the protection of data in the cloud, known as ISO 27018. ISO 27018 contains a number of data control requirements, and last March we became the first major cloud provider to certify to ISO 27018. We write that into our contract, so make sure your cloud services provider is ISO 27018 certified. An important law which you want to keep in mind is HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. It requires healthcare institutions and insurance companies to take on additional protections to secure data. Microsoft was the first major cloud provider to enter into a unique contract known as the Business Associate Agreement, the BAA, whereby we take on additional protections for healthcare-related data, and we provide a pathway for our HIPAA-regulated customers to comply with HIPAA. But nowadays, we're willing to sign our BAA terms with all of our enterprise customers, because after all, they probably have healthcare-related data involving their employees, which requires additional protections which we afford under the BAA.
Now, we're just about out of time, but before we let you run, we do want to pay off the results to our poll question. The audience has weighed in. Here they are. Does your company have a chief information security officer or a chief privacy officer? Maybe you got both, maybe you have neither. And look at that, 53% say neither in our final seconds here. Quick reaction to that.
Yeah, that's, to me, kind of shocking. In this day and age when we've been seeing these high-profile data loss incidents, it's surprising that companies are not investing in more privacy and security resources to protect their organization.
Well, Dennis, great stuff. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much,
Keep it up.